She was the PackShame until he bowed to her. Part 1. The night they dragged Ellie Cole through the center of Ironvale Pack territory, the moon was full and merciless. It hung low in the sky like a watching eye, cold, silver, unblinking, flooding the clearing between the great pine trees with light so sharp it carved shadows like blades. And in that light, every wolf in the pack could see exactly what she was. Nothing. That was what they called her. Nothing girl. Omega Trash. The one born without a wolf. Ellie's bare feet hit the frozen ground with each stumbling step, her wrists bound behind her back with thick rope that smelled of iron and old ash. Her dark hair was tangled across her face. Her gray eyes were dry. She had learned a long time ago that crying only made them worse. 50 wolves lined the path on either side of her. Some in human form, arms folded, faces carved from contempt. Others had let their wolves bleed through. Amber eyes glowing, lips pulled back just slightly. A growl sitting low in the back of their throats like thunder before a storm. At the end of the path stood Alpha Cade. He was a mountain of a man. Broad shoulders, dark hair shot through with silver at the temples, eyes the color of cold copper. He wore no shirt despite the winter air, because wolves like him never felt cold. Power kept them warm. Dominance kept them comfortable. And right now, Alpha Cade looked at Ellie the way a man looks at something he's already decided to throw away. "Ellie Cole," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing without effort. A voice built to command hundreds. Daughter of the late Beta Cole. Born to this pack. Raised by this pack. He paused. And a disgrace to this pack. A ripple went through the crowd. Agreement. Satisfaction. Ellie lifted her chin. She would not look at the ground. She had promised herself that years ago, standing in a different clearing after a different humiliation, she would never ever look at the ground. "You were caught," Cade continued, pacing slowly toward her. "Attempting to access the sacred archives. The records of the bloodlines. Records that are forbidden to unmated Omegas, forbidden to the wolfless, forbidden, most certainly, to you." "I had a reason," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Cade stopped, looked at her like she was a curious insect. "No one gave you permission to speak. My father is listed in those archives as a traitor," she said anyway, louder this time. Heads turned. "And he wasn't." "I know he wasn't. I was trying to find the truth." "Your father," Cade said, cutting her off like a blade through silk, "betrayed this pack to the Ravenmoor wolves. He led a scouting party into an ambush that killed 7 of our warriors. The archives simply record what happened. The archives record what you wanted recorded," she said quietly. The silence that followed was the loudest sound she had ever heard. Cade's eyes went very, very still. "Exile," he said. One word. Final as a coffin lid. The crowd didn't gasp. They didn't protest. A few of them smiled. Ellie had known, somewhere in the hollow part of her chest where hope used to live, that it would come to this eventually. She had pressed her luck too many times, asked too many questions, existed too loudly in spaces that wanted her silent. Still exile. She was 23 years old. She had lived her entire life behind the borders of Ironvale territory. The world beyond the tree line was not a world she knew. "You will be escorted to the eastern border," Cade said, already turning away from her, already done with her. "And you will be given 1 hour's head start before the border wolves are released." The border wolves. That was what they called the pack's most feral shifters. The ones who ran the perimeter, half-wild, eyes always gold, always hungry. They were not sent to kill. They were sent to drive. To chase. To make sure the exile ran and kept running and never ever came back. Someone cut the rope from her wrists. She rubbed them slowly, feeling the blood rush back. 50 wolves watched her. 50 faces that had shared meals with her, or at least shared territory. 50 people who had called her pack once and now looked at her like she was already gone. She turned. She walked. She did not look at the ground. "Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back. If you're new here, oh, you are in for something. My name is your storyteller, and this channel is your home for the most emotional, the most gripping, the most absolutely cannot put it down werewolf stories you will ever hear. Today's story is called She Was the PackShame Until He Bowed to Her. And I need you to buckle in because this one is going to wreck you in the best possible way. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city and country in the comments. I read every single one, and I love knowing who's out there listening with me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it right now. Just tap that button. Takes 2 seconds and it means the world. Okay, let's go back to Ellie. Part 2. Ellie Cole had never been what the pack wanted her to be. That had been true since the day she was born, when the midwife placed her in her mother's arms and said, carefully, gently, with the particular softness that people use when delivering bad news, "She's healthy. She's beautiful. But I don't feel a wolf in her." No wolf. In an entire world built around wolves, built around shifting, around pack bonds, around the sacred connection between human and animal, Ellie had arrived empty. A body without its second half. A sentence missing its most important word. Her father, Beta Cole, had held her anyway. Had looked down at her tiny wrinkled face and said, "She's mine. And she's here. That's enough." For a while with him alive it almost was. Cole had been one of the finest Betas Ironvale had ever seen. Loyal, brilliant, a strategist with instincts that bordered on supernatural. He had served Alpha Cade's father before Cade himself rose to power, and his reputation was a shield around his daughter. When the other pups called Ellie names, blank-born, empty-skin, ghost girl, they did it carefully, quietly, where Beta's ears couldn't reach. When the training sessions left Ellie standing on the sidelines while the others shifted and ran and howled at the moon, her father would sit beside her on the grass, still in his human form, and say, "Tell me what you see." And she would describe it. The way the moonlight caught in shifting fur. The way a wolf's body remembered what a human body forgot. The way the whole pack moved together like a single breathing thing, like one enormous heart. "Good," her father would say. "You see things they can't see, Ellie. 'Cause you're looking, not just feeling. That matters. That will always matter." She had believed him. Then he died. She was 12 years old when the news came. A scouting mission gone wrong. 7 dead wolves. And Beta Cole listed among the casualties, but not listed among the honored fallen. Listed instead as the cause. Traitor, the pack said. He led them into it on purpose, they said. He sold us out to Ravenmoor, they said. Ellie knew it wasn't true. She knew it the way she knew her own heartbeat, with a certainty that had nothing to do with evidence and everything to do with knowing someone. Her father had loved this pack. Had loved these wolves. Had given his entire life to Ironvale. But she was 12 and she was wolfless, and no one was going to listen to a wolfless orphan girl making noise about the official record. So she learned to be quiet. She learned to work whatever work they'd give her, which was the work no one else wanted. Kitchen duty. Cleaning the pack house. Mending clothes. Tending the herb garden behind the healer's cottage, which was the only place she ever felt something close to peace. The herbs didn't care that she had no wolf. They grew anyway. They healed anyway. Ellie learned them all. Yarrow and wolfsbane and moonflower and the deep red berries of the heartleaf vine. She learned which ones stopped bleeding and which ones brought fever down and which ones, mixed in exactly the right proportion, could slow a heart or stop a wolf from shifting. She had never told anyone how much she knew. Knowledge, she had learned, was the only power available to those with nothing else. She had one friend. One true friend, Hannah, the Gamma's daughter. A small bright-eyed girl who had grown into a small bright-eyed woman, and who had absolutely no patience for pack hierarchy when it got between her and the people she loved. "You're too quiet again," Hannah told her one morning, finding Ellie in the herb garden with dirt on her hands and distance in her eyes. "I'm always quiet. You're too quiet even for you. What happened?" Ellie was silent for a moment. Then, "I found something in the old records room. A discrepancy. In the account of my father's last mission." Hannah went very still. "Ellie, someone changed something. I could see where the original ink was and the correction over it. The dates don't match. The patrol route they said he took, he couldn't have Han. That path was flooded that week. I remember because father came home wet to the knees twice that month from trying to cross the lower creek. He never went near the eastern ridge. You need to leave this alone. He was my father. And this is Cade's pack." Hannah gripped her hand hard. "Please, Ellie. Please. The only reason you've survived this long is because you've been small enough that they don't bother. If you start pulling at this thread." "Someone pulled it first," Ellie said. "Someone pulled it and wove something false in its place. And my father is in the ground with a traitor's name on his grave." Hannah closed her eyes. She had known even then that she couldn't stop Ellie. Couldn't stop her any more than you could stop a river by standing in front of it. But she tried. And now Ellie was walking toward exile, 1 hour's head start between her and the border wolves, with nothing but the clothes on her back and 11 years of suppressed fury keeping her feet moving forward. She had one other thing too. A small glass vial tucked into the hem of her sleeve. She had sewn the little pocket there months ago, just in case. The vial held a dark liquid. A mixture of her own careful making. A scent suppressant. Not perfect, not forever, but enough. Enough to confuse even a wolf's nose for an hour or two. Maybe enough to make the difference between escape and being run down in the dark. Maybe. Part 3. The eastern border of Ironvale territory ran along the base of the Greyvale Mountains, a jagged wall of stone and pine that had always marked the edge of the known world, at least as far as Ironvale wolves were concerned. Beyond those mountains was neutral ground. Wildland unclaimed. And beyond that, if you went far enough north and west, the territory of Stormridge pack. Ellie had about 30 minutes left of her head start when she crossed the tree line into the wild land. She unstoppered the vial and rubbed the liquid along her neck, her wrists, her ankles, the places where her pulse ran closest to the surface, where scent bled strongest. The smell hit her own nose like a wave of something mineral and sharp, like wet stone and pine resin and something else that had no name. She tucked the empty vial back into her sleeve. Then she ran. Not running away, she told herself. Running toward the truth, which was still out there somewhere. Buried under 11 years of lies. The mountains were brutal. The path, and there barely was a path. Wound up and up and up through rocks slick with old ice. Through gaps so narrow she had to turn sideways to squeeze through. Her hands bled from the climbing. Her breath came in hard white clouds. Below her she could hear it now. The border wolves. Not close yet, but moving. She climbed faster. She made it over the first ridge just as the howl went up behind her. Long, wild, cutting through the night air like something with teeth. The border wolves had picked up the trail. Her scent suppressor was good, but she wasn't foolish enough to think it would hold forever. She scrambled down the other side of the ridge, half-sliding, gravel cascading around her feet, and that was when she ran directly into a chest. She hit it like a wall. She bounced back, nearly went over a loose piece of shale, and was caught. One large hand closing around her forearm with a grip that was iron and absolutely effortless. "Careful," said a voice. She looked up. The man looking down at her was tall, taller than she'd registered in the split second of collision. Broad through the shoulders, dressed in dark clothing that blended into the night, with dark hair and eyes that caught what little light reached the mountain pass and reflected it back silver. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, but there was something in his face that was older than that. A seriousness, a weight, the particular stillness of someone who had been responsible for things that mattered. He was a wolf. She could feel it. Even without her own wolf's instincts, she had spent her entire life reading shifters, and the air around him had that quality, that density, that the truly powerful ones carried. "Who are you?" she said. "Who are you?" he said back, looking at her with those silver-catching eyes, and then he looked past her at the ridge she'd just come over, and his expression changed. "Are those Ironvale border wolves?" "Yes." "Are you in exile?" She thought about lying. "Yes." Something flickered across his face. Not contempt. She braced for contempt, had grown up reading it, but something she couldn't quite name. Something more like recognition. "Can you run?" he said. "I've been running for 30 minutes across a mountain." "I mean, can you keep running?" "Yes." "Then run," he said. "Follow me." And that was how Ellie Cole, the PackShame, the wolfless nothing girl, began her new life. Running through the dark behind a stranger on a mountain she didn't know, with wolves howling behind her and nothing but forward as an option. His name, she would learn very soon, was Liam. Liam Cross. Alpha of Stormridge Pack. Oh, are you feeling this? Because I need you to drop a comment right now if this story has already got your heart going. And tell me, what do you think of our Ellie? Is she not everything? Subscribe if you haven't, because we are just getting started. Part 4. The Stormridge Pack house sat in a valley 2 hours west of the mountains, tucked between old-growth forest and a river that ran quick and cold even in winter. It was nothing like Ironvale's compound. No stone walls, no formal gates, no architecture that announced power. Stormridge announced power differently. Through the trees. Through the silence. Through the complete absence of anything that needed to announce itself. Liam brought her to the pack house as the sun was just beginning to consider rising, the sky a deep bruised purple at the horizon. People were waiting. Of course they were. Word had gone ahead somehow, the way it always did in wolf packs, through channels human ears couldn't follow, and the small crowd gathered at the pack house steps looked at Ellie the way crowds always looked at her. Calculating. Measuring. A woman stepped forward. Mid-40s, silver-streaked hair pulled back, face like carved mahogany. Handsome and fierce and utterly certain of herself. She looked at Ellie, then looked at Liam, and something passed between them that Ellie couldn't read. "An Ironvale exile," the woman said. Not a question. "Yes, Aunt Sophia," Liam said. "Wolfless," Sophia said. Ellie's jaw tightened. 11 years of practice kept her face still. "Yes," she said. Sophia's eyes stayed on her for a long moment. A testing silence, the kind designed to make you flinch or look away. Ellie met it steadily. Sophia said and stepped aside. "There's a room on the second floor. East side. It's yours for now." Now, the word had edges on it. Ellie understood. Temporary. Conditional. As all things for her were. "Thank you," she said. The crowd parted. She walked through it. She didn't sleep. How could she? She lay on the narrow bed in the east-facing room and stared at the ceiling and thought about her father and the dates in the records that didn't match and the flooded creek and 7 dead wolves and the question that had haunted her since she was 12 years old. If her father hadn't led that patrol into an ambush, then who had? And why? And how deep did the lie go? She was still staring at the ceiling when a knock came at the door. Light. 2 taps. "Come in," she said. It was Liam. He had changed from his mountain clothes into something simpler. A dark Henley sleeves-pushed-up jeans. Without the context of the mountain and the howling wolves behind her and the adrenaline, he looked younger. Or maybe more real. There was a careful quality to how he moved, she noticed. Like someone who was always aware of how much space he took up and was trying to take up less. "I brought food," he said, holding up a plate. And I thought we should talk. He set the plate on the small table by the window, bread, cheese, some sliced cold meat, a cup of what turned out to be strong black tea, and pulled a chair from the corner while she sat on the edge of the bed. What did you do? He said. To get exiled? She told him. Briefly, cleanly, without editorializing. She told him about the records room and the discrepancy and the dates and the flooded creek. She told him about Cade and the clearing and the rope on her wrists. He listened. That was the first thing that really struck her about Liam Cross. He listened in a way that was complete. Like when you spoke to him, the words went somewhere real instead of just glancing off the surface of someone's impatience. Your father, he said when she finished. Beta Cole. You've heard of him. Ironvale and Stormridge share a border and a history. He paused. The story Ironvale tells about your father's last mission. I always thought there were holes in it. Her heart did something sudden and complicated. What kind of holes? The kind that show up when someone in authority needs to explain a disaster without accepting responsibility for it. He laced his fingers together, elbows on his knees, looking at her steadily. The attack that killed those 7 Ironvale wolves, it happened on the border of a disputed zone. Stormridge remembers it too. Our own scouts reported it. He paused again, longer this time. Ellie, the patrol that walked into that ambush was given coordinates by Alpha Command. Your father didn't choose that route. He was ordered to take it. The ceiling. Staring at it. The way time seems to slow when something you already knew is confirmed outside the privacy of your own head. By Cade, she said. By Cade's father, who was still Alpha at the time. But Cade was his second. And Cade had been the one pushing for provocation with Ravenmoor. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. They sent my father into an ambush, she said slowly. And then blamed him for it. I believe so. Yes. Why are you telling me this? He was quiet for a moment. In the growing morning light through the east window, his face was all planes and angles, and something in his expression looked like it caused him to say what he said next. Because you deserve to know the truth about your father. And because, he stopped. Started again. Stormridge has been building a case against Cade's leadership for 2 years. Not just for what happened to your father's patrol. There are other things. Things Cade has done that violate the Pack Accords. His jaw tightened. What's in those Ironvale archives, the original uncorrupted version, could be evidence. If we could access it. Ellie looked at him. You want my help, she said. I want to offer you a deal, he said carefully. You tell me everything you saw in those archives before you were caught. Everything, the discrepancy, the dates, anything else that seemed wrong. And in exchange, Stormridge gives you sanctuary. A real home. Not temporary. Not conditional. He met her eyes. And we clear your father's name. She had been offered things before. Crumbs. Corners. The mercy of being ignored rather than actively tormented. She had never been offered something real. How do I know you'll keep your word? She said. He didn't answer immediately. He reached into his pocket and set something on the table between them. A small flat disc of dark metal, etched with a running wolf. That's the Stormridge Alpha seal, he said. My seal. If I swear on it, it binds in pack law. She looked at the disc. Then at him. Swear, she said. He picked it up. Held it between his fingers. I swear on the Stormridge Alpha seal that if you share what you know, Ellie Cole will have sanctuary in Stormridge territory for as long as she chooses. Her father's name will be brought before the Interpack Council for re-evaluation, and no harm will come to her from Stormridge wolves, while she is under this pack's protection. He set it back down. Done. The gravity of it settled into the room. Pack oaths were not words. They were architecture. They built something between people that could not easily be unmade. Ellie picked up the tea. It was warm and strong and tasted like something grounding. All right, she said. Then let me tell you everything. Over the days that followed, Ellie became a fixture of the Stormridge pack house in the way that quiet people become fixtures, gradually, without announcement, until suddenly people couldn't quite remember a time they hadn't been there. She worked in the healer's cottage because that was what she knew. The Stormridge healer, a wiry man named Eli with ink-stained fingers and a very short temper, discovered within about 20 minutes of meeting her that she knew things about plant medicine that he hadn't expected. Where did you learn this? He said, watching her sort through his supply of dried herbs with quick, certain hands. Ironvale Herb Garden. 11 years. Ironvale. He said it like a flavor he didn't particularly like. They let a wolfless girl near the herbs? They let me do anything that needed doing and that no one else wanted to do, she said pleasantly. He grunted. Fine. You can stay. High praise she gathered from Eli. She helped with 3 healings in her first week. A young wolf who'd broken 2 ribs in training. An elderly female who had a chest infection that wasn't responding to the standard treatment. Ellie suggested adding a specific ratio of thyme oil, and the woman improved within 2 days. A pup who'd gotten into something he shouldn't have in the forest and needed his stomach settled. Word spread. The way word does. She also kept working with Liam in the evenings, going through everything she remembered from the Ironvale archives, everything she'd seen and read and memorized in the years she'd spent finding excuses to be near those records. She had a very good memory, the kind that came from spending a childhood with nothing to do but pay close attention to everything, and piece by piece something started to take shape. There had been communications, letters or records of letters, between Alpha Cade's father and someone in Ravenmoor. Before the ambush. Well before. He was talking to Ravenmoor, Ellie said one evening, in the small office where they'd set up their notes, papers spread across the desk, her careful handwriting reconstructing what she'd read. Cade's father. He was coordinating with them. The ambush wasn't Ravenmoor aggression, it was arranged. Cade's father needed a reason to declare war on Ravenmoor so he could seize the territory along the disputed zone. And he needed someone to blame when wolves died. Liam was very still. He sacrificed 7 of his own wolves, he said. And my father. And my father's reputation. Liam stood. Walked to the window. She watched his back, the way his hands went to his hips, the particular tension that lived in someone's shoulders when they were carrying something heavy. This goes beyond what I thought, he said quietly. If Cade's father arranged that ambush and Cade knew, if Cade has been protecting this. Cade was 18 when it happened, Ellie said. She'd done the math. Old enough to know. Old enough to inherit the secret. The Interpack Council meets in 6 weeks. He turned from the window. His eyes found hers and held. If we bring this to them with documentation with your testimony. My testimony. She said it carefully. The testimony of a wolfless Omega exile. The testimony of Beta Cole's daughter. He said it like a correction. And the testimony of an alpha. He held her gaze. I'll stand beside you. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in the air of the room had changed over the weeks, she'd noticed. Had shifted in the way that seasons shifted, gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one morning you stepped outside and realized that what had been cold was now warm, and you couldn't quite identify the exact moment of the change. She noticed how he listened. She noticed how he was careful always to ask rather than direct, to offer rather than command. She noticed that when he looked at her it wasn't the way people usually looked at her. Not measuring. Not dismissing. Just looking. Like she was the most interesting thing in the room, and also the most complicated, and he had absolutely no interest in resolving either of those things quickly. She noticed that she'd started paying attention to when he was in the room and when he wasn't, which was inconvenient information she had absolutely no use for. You'll stand beside me, she said. Yes. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Then, because it's right. He paused. And because, he stopped. Because. He shook his head slightly, almost smiled. Ask me again later. She filed that away. Somewhere next to all the other things she was trying not to feel. Part 5. 3 weeks into Ellie's time at Stormridge, Hannah arrived. She appeared at the packhouse gates at dawn on a Wednesday, half frozen and out of breath and looking like she'd run through the mountains by sheer spite. She had. Ellie pulled her inside and wrapped her in a blanket and put hot tea in her hands and said, What happened? What are you doing here? Are you all right? I'm fine, I'm fine. Hannah's teeth were chattering but her eyes were sharp. Ellie. I found something. She pulled a folded document from inside her coat. Slightly damp at the edges. Her hands were shaking but with cold, not fear. I found it in the Alpha archives, she said. In the section behind the old council records. The section that's supposed to be empty because historical documents were transferred to Central Repository in year 34. She made the air quotes with her fingers. Except they weren't all transferred. Someone missed one. Ellie unfolded the document. It was a letter. Old, the ink was brown at the edges, the paper thick and slightly brittle. She read it once. Read it again. It was a letter from Cade's father, Alpha Cade Sr., to the Ravenmoor Alpha, dated 3 weeks before the ambush. And it outlined, in language that left absolutely no room for misinterpretation, the exact arrangement. 7 wolves would be sent down the eastern ridge path. Ravenmoor would be waiting. The battle would be brief and decisive. In exchange, Ravenmoor would cede the eastern watercourse territory, valuable rich land, to Ironvale, and would publicly claim no responsibility. The casualties would be mourned. The blame would be assigned. The name at the bottom. Beta Damon Cole. Written as the designated blame carrier. His name already written down. Before he died. Before he ever took those wolves down that path. Her father had been selected as the scapegoat before the mission even began. Ellie sat down. She didn't mean to sit down. Her legs just made the decision. There's more, Hannah said quietly. Gently. The way you speak to someone you're afraid might shatter. Tell me, Ellie said. Her voice was perfectly level. She was somewhere behind her own face, watching herself be calm. The letter isn't just from the old Alpha. Hannah pointed to a notation in the bottom corner. A single initial countersigned. A date 4 years later. The current Kate saw this. He found it in his father's files when he came to power. He didn't destroy it. He kept it. Hannah pressed her lips together. Ellie. He's been using it as leverage over the Ravenmore Alpha's son, their current Alpha. Blackmail. That's why Ravenmore has been so compliant with Ironvale demands over the last 5 years. That's why they never pushed back on the border expansions. Kate has had them over a barrel. The whole shape of it clicked together in one dreadful moment of clarity. The ambush. The deaths. Her father's name in the dirt. And then the blackmail. The use of the crime to commit more crimes. A tower of wrong things, each one built on the grave of the last. We have the letter, Ellie said. We have the letter. This is everything. She looked up at Hannah. Hannah, this is everything. I know. Hannah managed a small trembling smile. I know. And I ran here through a mountain in winter to bring it to you. So you are never, ever allowed to call me a coward again. Ellie stood, crossed the room, held her friend like a person holds the only thing that has always been true. I've never called you a coward, she said. You've thought it very loudly when I tell you to leave things alone. Fair. She brought it to Liam that same morning. She laid the letter on his desk and watched him read it. Watched his face go very still. Watched his hands flatten on the desk. He read it twice. Looked up at her. He selected your father's name before the mission, he said. Yes. He's been blackmailing Ravenmore Alpha. Yes. He stood. Crossed to the window again. She noticed he always went to the window when he was thinking hard, like he needed the sky in his eyeline to process something large. He stood there in silence for a long moment. If we bring this to the Interpack Council in 6 weeks, he started. 3 weeks, she said. We can't wait 6 weeks, Liam. Now that Hannah is gone from Ironvale, Cade will know something happened. He'll look in those archives. He'll realize the letter is missing. We have maybe days before. He turned. You're right. She blinked. Not you're overreacting. Not let me think about this. Just you're right. I can call an emergency session, he said. 2 weeks. That gives us time to get proper documentation prepared. Get legal counsel, get everything we need. He was already moving to his desk, already pulling out paper and reaching for his phone. He stopped, looked at her. Are you all right? The question caught her completely off guard. In her experience, the relevant parties in a crisis were never asked if they were all right. They were expected to function, to be useful. The person at the center of the storm was generally just the storm. She stopped. You just found out your father's name was chosen before he even walked out the door, Liam said quietly. That they picked him specifically. That someone sat down and wrote his name on a piece of paper and decided he was the one whose reputation they'd bury. He looked at her with those silver-in-the-dark eyes, and there was nothing in them but honest concern. That's not something a person just absorbs and moves on. She felt something loosen in her chest. Something she'd been holding so tightly for so long she'd forgotten it was clenched. I'm not all right, she said. Honestly. The honesty felt strange in her mouth, like a flavor she'd been told she couldn't have. But I will be. When this is done. She held his gaze. When his name is cleared. He looked at her for a long moment, and then very quietly, as if it was something he hadn't quite planned to say. It will be. I'll make sure of it. She believed him. That was the most dangerous thing that had happened to her yet. But then everything blew apart. 2 days later, Liam called her to his office with a face she hadn't seen before. Closed off. Careful. Something locked behind his eyes. We have a problem, he said. Sophia was there too. Arms folded, expression neutral in the way that very good poker players go neutral. What problem? Ellie said. Liam set a document on the desk. She looked at it. It was from the Interpack Council. A preliminary brief, forwarded to all alphas, regarding the upcoming emergency session. She read the second paragraph. It has been brought to the Council's attention that Alpha Cross of Stormridge has provided sanctuary to an Ironvale exile without proper notification to Ironvale Pack leadership, in potential violation of the Interpack Accord on territorial refugees. A formal complaint has been lodged by Alpha Cade of Ironvale. The Council will require testimony on this matter before proceedings can continue. Cade found out, she said. Cade found out. Liam's voice was careful. He filed the complaint this morning. It's technically valid. I should have notified him within 72 hours under the Accord. I didn't because Because I knew he'd demand your return immediately. And, she said. Sophia spoke. And if the Council rules the sanctuary invalid, they have the authority to order you return to Ironvale territory. Her voice was flat and factual. Not unkind but not soft either. Pending the outcome of the complaint hearing. Ellie absorbed this. Return to Ironvale territory. To Cade, who had just watched his 20-year secret start walking toward the light. He'll kill me, she said. Not dramatically. As a simple assessment of the facts. Not officially, Sophia said. No, not officially. Liam's hands were flat on the desk again. That stillness she'd come to recognize as him working very hard to control something. I'm not sending you back, he said. I want to be clear about that. I will fight this complaint through every legal channel available. There may not be time, Ellie said. Then we make time. Liam. She said it quietly. His name. First time she'd used just his name without the alpha title, and it landed in the room differently, changed the temperature. He went quiet. I know what I have to do. Part 6. What she had to do was the bravest and most terrifying thing she had ever considered. She had to go back. Not as an exile. Not stumbling through the night with wolves at her heels. But forward through the front gate with her head up, carrying the letter. That's not what we planned, Liam said when she told him. His voice was quiet but the words were sharp. The plan changed when Cade filed his complaint. She kept her voice steady. If I go back voluntarily on my own terms, it changes the story. He can't position me as a refugee or a threat. I'm a woman returning to clear her father's name. Publicly. In front of witnesses. He'll arrest you the moment you step on Ironvale soil. Then that arrest will be witnessed by whoever comes with me. She met his eyes. I need witnesses, Liam. Council recognized witnesses. If I walk back in there with you with a Stormridge alpha, and with the letter, and Cade arrests me or harms me, he does it in front of someone with actual power. That's a completely different situation than me being exiled into the dark. She could see him working through it. Working through the logic of it and hating the logic of it simultaneously. If something goes wrong, he started. Then we were always going to lose, she said. The letter needs to be presented. My testimony needs to be given. And the only way to do that is for me to be present. In person. Before the council. She paused. I'm not asking you to let me do something reckless. I'm asking you to trust that I have spent 23 years surviving people who underestimated me, and I know exactly how much I can withstand. A long silence. I'm coming with you, he said. I was counting on it. But the night before they were supposed to leave, Cade moved first. He sent wolves into Stormridge territory. Not an army, nothing that blatant. 3 wolves, fast and quiet, who came in through the western tree line and put something in the water supply. Not poison, nothing so crude. A suppressant. A chemical compound that would make the Stormridge wolves sluggish, slow their shifts, take the edge off their power. They were also carrying orders, apparently, because 2 of them made it all the way to the pack house before the Stormridge sentinels caught them. In the resulting chaos, wolves shifting, alarm calls going up, Sophia coordinating the response from the main hall. Someone took the letter. Ellie's room was torn apart. Not dramatically. Neatly. Professionally, in a way that told her whoever did it had been very, very good at this sort of thing. Her bag was emptied. Her hidden pockets were found and checked. The letter was gone. She stood in the wreckage of her room, clothes pulled from the wardrobe, the mattress dragged from the bed frame, the small box of herbs she'd been building scattered across the floor, and she felt the enormity of the loss land in her like a stone dropped into deep water. Hannah's dangerous run through the mountains. The letter that was her father's exoneration. Gone. She was still standing there when Liam appeared in the doorway. He took in the room in a single sweep. His face was stone. They took it, she said. I know. It was the only physical proof. I know. Without it, it's my word against Cade's. My word and your word, neither of which. Ellie. He crossed the room to her. Stopped close enough that she had to look up at him. His eyes were very steady. Look at me. She looked. We still have your testimony. Hannah's testimony. The discrepancies you identified in the archive records. The date inconsistencies. The patrol route. He held her gaze. And we have the Ravenmoor Alpha. She blinked. What? His name is Aaron. Alpha Aaron of Ravenmoor. Cade has been blackmailing him with his father's complicity in the original ambush arrangement. If we go to Aaron directly, if we tell him what we know and tell him we're bringing this to the council, he has 2 choices. He can go down with Cade when this comes out, or he can get ahead of it. His jaw tightened. If Aaron chooses to testify, if he tells the council his father was coerced and manipulated by Iron Veil, then we don't need the letter, she said slowly. We still need everything else. But Aaron's testimony would be significant. She pressed her fingers to her forehead, thinking hard. Can you reach him? Directly? Without going through official channels that Cade monitors? I already sent a message 2 hours ago, he said. She stared at him. When did you? When I heard the alarm and realized what Cade had sent his wolves for. He almost smiled. I work fast when I have to. She shook her head slowly. Something that might, in a different moment, have been a laugh. She sat down on the bare mattress frame, put her face in her hands, let herself feel for just a moment the weight of all of it. Her father, the letter, the room, the years, the exile, the running, the cold ground under her bare feet, the 50 faces that hadn't moved. And then she felt a hand on her shoulder. Gentle. Just there. Just present. She lifted her face. He was crouched down in front of her, level with her eyes, close enough that she could see the small scar at his jaw and the way his eyes in this close light were not simply silver gray but layered. Brown at the inner ring, silver toward the outside, like something that shifted depending on how you looked. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For all of it. For everything this pack should have been to you and wasn't. You're not Ironvale, she said. No. But I'm a wolf who knows what wolves can be to each other. Something complicated moved through his expression. You should have been protected. You should have been valued. From the beginning. He held her gaze. And I know this doesn't fix what happened, but I want you to know that I see exactly what you are. What you've always been. He paused. Not nothing. Not a shame. Not a wolfless Omega exile. You are the sharpest, bravest, most remarkable person in this room. There's only 2 people in this room. I stand by the statement. She laughed. An actual laugh, small and real, startled out of her. It felt strange in her chest, like a muscle that had been clenched so long it ached when it relaxed. Liam, she said. Ellie. Don't say things you don't mean to follow through on. I never have, he said, and the steadiness in his voice was absolute. The way the mountains were absolute. The way the river was absolute. Unchanging not because it was rigid but because it was fully itself, and nothing in the world was going to push it off course. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then, okay, she said. Tell me about Aaron of Ravenmoor. Part 7. Aaron of Ravenmoor was not what she expected. He was young, 27, barely older than her, and when he arrived at the neutral meeting point they'd arranged, a clearing halfway between Stormridge and Ravenmoor territory, he came alone. No escort. No show of force. He had brown eyes and the slightly shell-shocked air of someone who had been holding a terrible secret for longer than was reasonable and was considering, with enormous relief, the possibility of putting it down. You know, he said, sitting across from Ellie in the cold clearing. I've been waiting for someone to find out for 3 years. 3 years, she said. That's when Cade figured out my father's involvement and used it to renegotiate our arrangement. Aaron stared at his hands. He took the Eastern Watercourse territory back first, then hunting rights in the neutral strip. Then he wanted first call on Ravenmoor warriors for his border disputes. His mouth tightened. My father made a deal with a monster to get some land, and then his son inherited the debt. My father made no deal, Ellie said quietly. He just happened to be standing where the convenience story needed a villain. Aaron looked at her. Something moved through his face, shame, recognition, the particular discomfort of someone seeing the full weight of what they've been complicit in, even indirectly. I'll testify, he said. Everything I know. Everything Cade told me. Everything I can document. He looked at Liam. But I need assurance that Stormridge will stand as my guarantor before the council. If this goes wrong. It won't go wrong, Liam said. If it does. I'll stand as your guarantor, Liam said. You have the Stormridge Alpha seal on that. Aaron nodded slowly. Swallowed. All right. He looked back at Ellie. Your father, from what my father told me about the arrangement, he wasn't supposed to die. The plan was for most of the patrol to be driven back. 1 or 2 casualties at most, just enough to justify outrage. But something went wrong in the execution. He paused. Beta Cole fought back. He protected the wolves behind him. He gave them time to escape, and in doing so, he stopped. Ellie was very still. He saved lives, she said. It wasn't a question. 3 of the 7 who died did so covering each other's retreat. The other 4 died early in the engagement, before your father understood what was happening. But the 6 wolves who got away, the survivors, they got away because of your father. Aaron held her gaze. Cade buried that too. In the official account, the survivors just got lucky. Scattered and ran. It doesn't say who held the line. She pressed her lips together. Breathed through her nose. Her father, standing in the chaos of an ambush he hadn't known was coming, in territory he'd been sent to deliberately, and choosing in that moment, to do what a beta does. To stand between the wolves he was protecting and the thing trying to reach them. Dying for a pack that had been designed to be his executioner. She thought of 12-year-old herself, standing outside the door while they told her mother. Standing with her fists clenched and her face very still because she had already learned, even then, that wolf packs had no comfort for girls who didn't fit. She thought of his voice. Tell me what you see. Thank you, she said to Aaron very quietly. Thank you for telling me. They went to the council in 4 days. In those 4 days, Ellie did not sleep much. She spent hours with Stormridge's legal counsel, A sharp older woman named June who had 30 years of Interpack law in her head and absolutely no mercy for imprecision. She prepared her testimony in meticulous detail. Every date, every discrepancy, every record she'd seen in the Ironvale archives, every piece of the picture. Hannah testified to what she'd found, both verbally and in a signed declaration. The document itself was gone, but Hannah had memorized it, line by line, before bringing it to Ellie. Under June's questioning, she reproduced it word for word. Aaron had his own documentation from 3 years of interactions with Cade. And Liam prepared his own testimony, and Ellie heard parts of it as she passed the office late one night on her way to make tea. She stopped in the hallway, listening to him practice the words aloud, alone in the dark, and what he said was not tactical or political or strategic. He talked about Ellie, about what she'd told him, about the records room and the exile and the 50 wolves who hadn't moved, about what it meant, what it really meant, when a pack failed one of its own so completely that she had to cross a mountain in winter and fall into a stranger's path just to find a place to exist. She stood in the hallway for a long time. She didn't interrupt. She went back to her room and lay on her bed and pressed her hand flat against her chest where her heart was doing something inconvenient and undeniable. She thought about what he'd said in her wrecked room. "I see exactly what you are." She thought about the way he'd said her name. Ellie. Like it was important. Like it was the one piece of information he was certain about in all the uncertainty. She thought about how dangerous it was to need someone. How catastrophically, devastatingly dangerous. For someone who had spent her whole life needing no one because needing someone was just a way of handing them the thing they'd used to hurt you. She thought about all of this for a very long time. And then she got up, walked to his office and knocked on the door. He opened it. He was in the middle of putting on his jacket. He looked surprised. "What's wrong?" he said. "Nothing's wrong," she said. "I just wanted to." She stopped. Started again. "You asked me earlier why I wanted this. Clearing my father's name. If I wanted it for him or for me." She held his gaze. "I've been thinking about the answer." He leaned against the doorframe. "Waiting." "Both," she said. "I want it for him because he deserves it. He was good and they buried it. But I also want it for me. Because I've been carrying this thing, this wrong thing, this version of my father that they made up. And every time someone called me the traitor's daughter, they put another stone on me." She touched her chest. "I want to put it down. I want to stop being defined by what they decided to write over the truth." A pause. "And I wanted you to know that. Because you've been helping me find it. And I wanted you to know what it actually means." He was very still. Then he said slowly, "Ellie, earlier when I said ask me again later." "Yes," she said. "The reason I'm standing beside you in this isn't just because it's right." His voice was careful, precise, like he was picking each word out of a pile of imprecise ones and making sure it was exactly the right shape. "It's because somewhere in the last few weeks, the idea of not standing beside you became the most uncomfortable thought I could have." He held her gaze. "I think you know what that means." She did know. "That's inconvenient," she said. "Genuinely, yes. We're in the middle of the most legally and politically complex situation I've been in my life. I'm aware. And you have an emergency council session in 3 days. I know the schedule." She looked at him. He looked at her. The hallway of the Stormridge pack house was quiet and dark and smelled of wood smoke in winter. "After," she said. "After," he agreed. Something settled between them, not resolved but held. Safe, like a flame sheltered from the wind. Part 8. The Interpack Council convened in the neutral hall at Valemount, a long stone building at the geographic center of 4 territories, cold and formal and smelling of old wood and old authority. 8 alphas. The council head, an ancient woman named Margaret who had presided over Interpack law for longer than most of those present had been alive and who had the quality of absolute mountains, immovable, unimpressed, and absolutely committed to accuracy. Cade was already there when Ellie arrived. She saw him across the hall and he saw her, and what passed between them was not speech. It was recognition. 2 people who understood each other completely after all, who both knew what had happened and what it meant, looking at each other across a stone floor. He had not expected her to come back. She could see it in the slight shift of his jaw, the way his eyes went careful. She kept walking, found her seat, looked at no one else in particular. Margaret called the session to order. Cade's complaint about the territorial refugee violation was heard first. It was genuinely a technical violation. Liam had not given proper notice. June presented Stormridge's defense. Extenuating circumstances, the Alpha's reasonable belief that proper notice would result in harm to the individual, and the precedent of past council decisions protecting refugees from imminent danger. The council deliberated for 20 minutes. The complaint was dismissed as a mitigating violation. Minor sanctions only. Cade's face was very still. Then Liam called for the substantive hearing. Ellie testified for 1 hour and 40 minutes. She stood at the council floor. Alone, no notes because she didn't need them, and she walked through everything she knew. The dates, the route, the flooded creek, the discrepancies in the records, the specific language of the letter Hannah had memorized and then recited, the timeline that put the selection of her father's name before the mission had even been ordered. She spoke clearly. She spoke without drama, without emotion in her voice, letting the facts carry their own weight, the way her father had told her to let the truth carry itself. The council was silent throughout. When she was done, Margaret asked her 3 questions. One about the specific dating discrepancy. One about the record-keeping convention she'd observed in the Ironvale archives. One about her personal relationship to the deceased Ellie Cole. She answered all 3. Hannah testified next. Recited the letter from memory with a precision that left the room very quiet. Then Aaron of Ravenmoor stood. He was young and visibly frightened, and he stood there anyway because some things are more important than being comfortable, and he told the council everything. His father's arrangement. The aftermath. The blackmail. 3 years of Cade's quiet, grinding extortion. He presented documentation, records of the territory concessions, private communications in which Cade had referenced our arrangement, and the matter of your father's role in language that was not quite explicit enough to be criminal but was, in full context, damning. Through all of this, Cade sat with his counsel beside him in a face like carved stone. He had not expected Aaron. That was the thing he hadn't anticipated. He had removed the letter. He had calculated for Ellie's testimony. He had prepared to dismiss and deflect and call her the wolfless orphan exile with a grief-driven grudge, which was what he'd been calling her for 23 years. He had not calculated for the person he'd been blackmailing, deciding that the weight of the secret was heavier than the consequence of revealing it. When Aaron finished, Margaret asked Cade to respond. He stood. He was still composed. She had to give him that. He'd had decades of practice at composed. He said that the testimony was circumstantial and that the letter, conveniently, no longer existed and therefore could not be verified, and that the word of a wolfless exile and a compromised Ravenmoor Alpha did not constitute. Alpha Cade, Margaret said. He stopped. She was looking at him with those mountain-old eyes over her half-spectacles, and her expression was not angry. It was worse than angry. It was tired. The tiredness of someone who has seen too much human evil to be surprised by it and is simply efficiently done. The council will convene privately, she said. They deliberated for 3 hours. Ellie sat in the waiting room outside the council chamber with Hannah on one side and Liam on the other. She didn't speak much. She had said what she had to say. The truth was in the room. Now it was up to the room to decide what to do with it. At one point Liam put his hand over hers on the armrests between their chairs. Just his hand over hers. Not gripping. Just there. She didn't move her hand. Hannah on her other side very carefully said nothing. When the council returned, Margaret stood. In the matter of Beta Damon Cole, formerly of Ironvale Pack, she said, and her voice filled the stone hall, absolutely. The council finds that the official record of his final mission is materially inaccurate. That he was the victim of deliberate, premeditated misrepresentation by the Ironvale Alpha Authority. And that his conduct during the ambush of year 34, in protecting the surviving members of his patrol, constitutes a record of extraordinary service and sacrifice. She paused. The designation of traitor is formally expunged. The Ironvale Pack historical record will be corrected. Beta Cole will be recognized among the honored fallen. Ellie pressed her lips together very hard. She would not cry here. She had made that decision before she arrived. But her hand under Liam's turned over and held on. Margaret continued. In the matter of Alpha Cade of Ironvale Pack. Cade stood. His counsel tried to touch his arm and he moved away from the hand. The council finds sufficient evidence of concealment of criminal activity, abuse of interpack authority, and extortion to warrant immediate suspension of Alpha Authority pending a full formal investigation. Margaret set down her paper. Pending the appointment of an interim authority by the Ironvale Council of Elders, Alpha Cade will surrender his seal and his pack communication channels to council oversight within 24 hours. The hall was so quiet that Ellie could hear her own heartbeat. Cade turned. He looked at her across the stone floor. And the strangest thing happened. The thing she had not expected. His face cracked. Not into rage. Into something that looked briefly terribly like grief. Like a man seeing the cost of something he'd been not looking at for 20 years, and finally looking at it. She didn't know what he'd decided about his father's crime. Whether he'd told himself it was necessary or justified or irreversible. Whether he'd grieved the dead or simply inherited the machinery of the lie, and decided it was too deeply embedded to excavate. It didn't change what he'd done. It didn't change what it had cost. But for one unguarded moment across the stone floor, she saw something human in him. And she did not hate him for it. That surprised her most of all. Outside the hall in the cold winter air, With the stone steps empty and the sky heavy with the particular gray of an afternoon that might bring snow, Liam stopped beside her. "Ellie," he said. She looked up at him. "After," she said. He smiled. A real one, not the controlled almost not that she'd been cataloging for weeks. A full one that reached everything, that changed his whole face. "After," he confirmed. And then she had to look away before she did something embarrassing. Hannah, behind them, made a sound that she rapidly converted into a cough. "I'm going to pretend I didn't hear any of that," she said. "And we are going to find somewhere that serves hot food, because I have had the most extraordinary and traumatic 2 weeks of my life and I need soup." Part 9. Spring came to Stormridge like a slow exhale, the snow retreating up the mountain slopes, the river running louder, the pine trees dropping the last of their winter burden and reaching upward in a way that made the whole forest look, inexplicably, like it was relieved. Ellie stood at the edge of the herb garden she'd built behind the healer's cottage. It was new, she'd started it from scratch in the Stormridge soil, transplanting and propagating and learning which plants preferred the different light, the different altitude, the different air of this valley as opposed to Ironvale's. Eli, the healer, came out twice a week and pretended to inspect it critically and invariably found nothing wrong. "Heartleaf's coming in well," he said, standing beside her now, not looking at her in the way he not looked at everyone he was fond of. "I was worried about the roots. The clay soil here is different. Yarrow's too close to the rosemary. They actually do fine together. The yarrow helps with drainage." A pause. He said, which was his version of "You're absolutely right and I'm slightly impressed." He went back inside. Ellie knelt down and pressed her fingers into the cold warm earth. The formal ceremony was 3 months after the council ruling. The Ironvale Council of Elders, who had, it turned out, more than a few of their own questions about Cade's leadership once the protection of his authority was removed, arranged it. Not because they owed it to Ellie, though they did, but because Pax, whatever else they were, maintained something that was older and deeper than politics. A memory. A need to name things correctly. The ceremony was held at the Ironvale Memorial Grounds, a grove of ancient trees where the Pax's honored dead were remembered. It was late April and the grove was full of green light, the kind that comes through new leaves, soft and liquid, like the world is made of something lighter than it usually is. A stone marker was placed among the others. Damon Cole, Beta of Ironvale, honored fallen, protector. Ellie stood in front of it for a long time. She hadn't come back to Ironvale since the exile. Had not been sure she ever would. The pack that had gathered here to watch was not the pack she remembered. Some faces had changed, some had gone, and the weight of what had been done here sat differently now that the truth was in the record. She saw a few people who had stood in that clearing while Cade pronounced her exile. They met her eyes differently than they once had. Some couldn't meet them at all. She didn't want their guilt. She didn't need it. She just needed this. Her father's name in stone, correct at last. "Tell me what you see." She looked at the marker. The grove. The green light. The way the old trees bent toward each other overhead like they were listening to something slow and patient and very old. "I see someone who knew," she thought toward him. Who knew and stood anyway. Who bought 6 wolves' time to get away and didn't survive it. And whose daughter is still here, still standing, still looking. She pressed her fingers to the stone. Cold under her hand. Solid. Real. "Hi, Dad," she said quietly. "I found it. The truth. I told them." The wind moved through the grove. She didn't cry. She had said she wouldn't and she didn't. But she stood there for a very long time, her hand on his name, and felt something change in her chest. Something massive and long-standing and load-bearing finally set down. Hannah had stayed at Stormridge. This was technically controversial as she was not an exile, but she had apparently decided that her choices about where she lived and with whom were her own to make. The Stormridge wolves had accepted her with characteristic directness. They assessed that she was useful, forthright, and not intimidated by shifters larger than herself, all of which checked out. And Hannah had very quickly become indispensable to the kitchen operations of the pack house, which she reorganized with a cheerful efficiency that left everyone slightly stunned. "I have opinions about meal planning," she told Ellie, without the slightest trace of apology. "I know," Ellie said. "The pack is benefiting from your opinions." "Yes, well." Hannah looked pleased. "I have also been told I have a mate bond forming with one of the Stormridge warriors, which is extremely unexpected and I'm choosing to address it by not addressing it for a few more months." Ellie tried not to laugh. "That's extremely healthy." "Thank you, I thought so." The moment that she always came back to afterward when she thought about how things changed was a morning in late May. She was in the healer's cottage grinding dried heartleaf when she heard footsteps she recognized on the path outside. A particular rhythm, unhurried and even, that she had memorized without meaning to. The door opened. Liam stood in the doorway, ducking slightly because the cottage door was built for Eli, who was much shorter, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking at her with an expression she was still learning to read, which was remarkable given that she'd considered herself an expert in reading people since approximately age 9. "Morning," he said. You always bring me coffee in the morning, she said. That's been true for 4 months. I walk past the kitchen on my way here. It's efficient. She took the cup. Why do you walk past the cottage every morning? I have business near the herb garden, he said very seriously. What business? Important business. She pressed her lips together. He had this quality of being perfectly capable of being completely earnest and teasing simultaneously, which should have been impossible, and which she found genuinely infuriating and also consistently the most appealing thing she'd encountered in a human being. Liam, she said. Ellie, he said. We said after. The after has been happening for 4 months, he said carefully, like someone who has been patient and is choosing deliberately to stop being patient. I would like, at some point in the non-distant future, for us to have an explicit conversation about what the after is. She looked at him. He looked at her. I think, she said slowly, that the after is this thing that's been happening for 4 months. Quietly, slowly, the way the good things happen. He set his own cup down on the workbench. Yes, he said. And I would also like it to be more than this. I would like explicitly to court you. In the formal pack sense. A pause. With your permission. The formal pack sense. She knew what that meant. It meant intention. It meant in front of the whole pack with no ambiguity, in the way that wolves did things when they were serious. She thought about standing in that exile clearing, 50 wolves who hadn't moved. She thought about how long she'd been invisible. How long she'd been nothing. Yes, she said. Explicitly. You have my permission. Something in his face, the last careful reserve of it, let go. He reached out and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear very gently. The way you touch something you've been being careful with for a long time and are finally allowed to be tender with. There's something else, he said. What? The pack wants to do something. Sophia organized it, so it was going to happen whether I sanctioned it or not, but I wanted to tell you first. He looked almost unsure for the first time she could remember. They want to formally welcome you. Not as a resident or a refugee or a guest. As pack. He held her gaze. Stormridge pack. She went very still. Pack. She had been packless for 3 months after her exile and 23 years before it, in every way that mattered. Pack was not geography. Pack was not an address or a territory. Pack was, it was the howl that found you in the dark. It was the thing that moved through 50 wolves at the same moment because they were one organism, one breathing thing. It was what she'd watched from the grass, unable to participate, while her father sat beside her and said, tell me what you see. I'm wolfless, she said. Old reflex. 11 years of being told it was disqualifying. Pack is not only about wolves, he said. We have 2 unmated humans in this pack. Sophia's mate was a human woman for 37 years before she found her wolf. It happens late sometimes or not at all, and it doesn't change what you are to the people who choose you. Liam. You have been more useful, more present, more genuinely necessary to this pack in 4 months than half the wolves who were born here, he said, and his voice was steady and warm and absolutely certain. Eli says you have saved 3 wolves who he is not sure he could have saved without you. Hannah, who doesn't take orders from anyone, consults you before she makes major decisions. The young wolves come to the cottage with scratches and bruises, and half of them come back the next day just to talk. He held her gaze. You are pack, Ellie. You've been pack since before we voted on it. The vote is just us saying out loud what's already true. She had kept so much in for so long. So long. Every grief and every slight and every quiet injustice, kept in because there was nowhere to put it, because packing things down was survival. She felt her eyes sting and did not try to stop it this time. Okay, she said. Yeah. Yes. She exhaled. Let the word settle. Let it become real in her chest. Yes. The ceremony was that evening in the clearing in front of the pack house, with the sky going soft orange and the whole of Stormridge gathered in a loose wide ring. Wolves and humans, pups sitting in the front because pups always ended up in front, Sophia standing to one side with arms crossed and an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral and failing. Hannah was openly crying, which she would later deny. Liam stood in the center of the clearing with Ellie beside him, and he turned to face his pack and he said in the voice built to carry to hundreds, tonight we welcome someone who has been carrying a story that was written wrong and carried it anyway, who walked toward truth when it would have been easier to walk away, who has given this pack her knowledge and her care and her extraordinary stubborn determination to make things right. He looked at Ellie. She looked at him. She looked at the pack around them, these wolves who had chosen her, who had made room for her, who had looked at her wolflessness and shrugged and said and she felt it. She felt the thing she hadn't been able to feel since she was 12 years old, standing in a different clearing with a different kind of watching. She felt like she belonged. Welcome home, Liam said. And then, and this was the part she would never quite be able to explain, because she had no wolf, had never had one, had been told her whole life that she was missing the most essential part of herself. And then something in the air of the clearing shifted. It was in her chest first. A warmth. Spreading outward. Like someone turning on a light in a room that had always been dark. Eli across the clearing went very still. Then he started moving toward her quickly, his professional alarm face on. "Ellie," he said. "What?" "Your heartbeat," he said. He was looking at her with the expression of a man who has seen many things and is currently seeing something unprecedented. It changed. "What do you mean it?" She felt it then. Different. A presence behind her own heartbeat. Layered under it like a harmonic under a note. Something ancient and patient and very much awake. Late sometimes, Liam had said. Or not at all. Or exactly when you finally have somewhere real to come home to. Eli looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Liam. Then he looked back at Ellie, and his expression, his perpetually severe, professionally unimpressed expression, cracked into something she had never seen from him before. He smiled. "Well," he said. "That's new." She shifted for the first time on a Tuesday in early June, behind the healer's cottage in the herb garden, with Liam there and Eli there and Hannah there with her hand pressed over her mouth watching with very round eyes. It was not graceful. First shifts rarely were. But it happened, it actually genuinely happened. Her wolf, silver gray and lean and with eyes that were, in this form, the exact color of the gray she'd looked out at the world through her entire life. Her wolf who had been waiting. Quietly, patiently, without complaint. For exactly the right moment. Liam went to his wolf beside her, massive and dark as midnight, and stood with her in the clearing, and through the mate bond that had been growing between them for months and was now undeniable, through that channel that ran between one wolf and another like a river between two shores, she felt what he felt. Ah, joy. A love so uncomplicated and certain that it was almost frightening in its simplicity. She pressed her shoulder against his in the way of wolves. He pressed back. The pack howled. The moon was rising. 3 years later, at the Interpack Council's annual gathering, a formal amendment was added to the pack accord. Wolfless individuals shall not be excluded from pack membership, pack rights, or pack ceremony on the basis of their shifting capacity. Pack is defined by choice, commitment, and community, not by the presence of any particular gift. The amendment was proposed by Alpha Liam Cross of Stormridge. It was seconded, publicly and loudly, by his mate, Ellie Cross, née Cole, former wolfless exile, late blooming wolf, daughter of the honored Beta Damon Cole. Passed unanimously. Cade, who was in the room, attending as a former Alpha without authority, as the investigation had stripped him of his title and his pack had voted in a new leadership, did not vote. He sat quietly in the back, an ordinary man in a room full of power, and Ellie looked at him once at the end and chose not to look with hate. Hate was a heavy thing. She had carried enough heavy things. She looked with something closer to. "I outlasted you. I told the truth and it held and we're both still here, and you have to watch the world be better than you wanted it to be." That was enough. More than enough. On the way home from the council gathering, in the car on the long road back through the mountains, with the windows down and the spring air thick with pine and coming rain, Hannah leaned forward from the back seat and said, "Can I just say?" "No," said Ellie. "I'm going to say it anyway." "I know. I told you," Hannah said, with the profound satisfaction of someone who has been right about something for a very long time. "I told you from the very beginning that the truth was worth finding. I told you in the herb garden with my hands on your hands years ago, I told you it would be worth it." "You told me to leave it alone," Ellie said. A short pause. "I have a very complicated relationship with my own advice," Hannah said with great dignity. "The point stands." Ellie laughed. It was the real kind, the full kind, the kind that came from somewhere deep and certain. Liam reached across the center console and found her hand. She laced her fingers through his. Outside the window the mountains passed, green and silver and ancient, keeping their own counsel, remembering everything. Ahead the valley, the river, the pack house, the herb garden, home. And if you are out there, if you are the one who has been told you are not enough, not right, not what the world wanted, listen. The truth does not go away just because someone buries it. And you do not disappear just because someone decides you don't fit. Somewhere, past the mountain you're climbing right now, there is a clearing where you belong. Keep moving. Dan. Oh my goodness. If you made it to the end of this story, I need you to know you are everything. You are the reason I keep telling these stories. Drop a comment below and tell me. What was your favorite moment? Was it the council reveal? The moment her wolf finally emerged? Or maybe Liam saying, "I see exactly what you are"? I need to know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Hit that button. Join this family. Because there are so many more stories where this one came from, and every single one of them is going to pull something out of your heart. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Until next time. Take care of yourselves and remember, the truth always finds a way.